Hey everybody, welcome to FoundFlix. On today's Ending Explained, we will be looking at the highly anticipated A Quiet Place, following a family that is forced to stay silent to survive in a post-apocalyptic landscape overrun with monsters. Director John Krasinski spins an impressively tense tale with almost absolutely no dialogue whatsoever, and teams up with his real-life wife Emily Blunt for the first time on screen. So let's look at A Quiet Place, breaking down the bigger story, explaining the ending, and examining what the monsters are lurking in the forest. Watch out for spoilers because there will be many of them. Our story follows the Abbott family, doing their best to survive after a huge event that changed the earth forever, leading to widespread death and destruction. Though the family lives relatively peacefully on their farm by themselves with seemingly no one else around. When it comes to what caused the event, the film does reveal what happened, but chooses to only leave clues behind in the background for us to discover, as shown in newspaper articles at the house collected by Lee, and that it is worldwide, not an isolated event. From what we see, without warning, from the sky, meteors dropped all around the earth, containing within horrifying eyeless monsters that use their heightened sense of sound to hunt. So yes, they're aliens, that much is made clear, and it's through other research by Lee that we learn more about the creatures as well. Now, while there aren't any full shots of the creatures in the trailers, if we use our imagination a bit, we can get a good idea of their appearance, as they reminded me of a combination of a few other big screen monsters. First of all, its body resembles a small version of the Cloverfield monster, these only a bit larger than humans. They have hard-shelled exteriors, similar to a bug, and long front limbs, which it uses to quickly run on all fours, along with sharp spikes on its arms that it uses to kill as well. In physical stature and in head structure, it's a bit more like the Demogorgon, but unlike the Demo, whose entire head opens up, this monster's head has flaps on the top half that open up, revealing on the side of its head an eardrum-esque inner flesh that it uses to amplify its supersonic hearing abilities. As it has no eyes, it uses its sense of sound exclusively to hunt. And interestingly, as noted by Lee, he questions why they don't eat what they kill, and their behavior in the movie backs this up as well, never seen eating their prey. So it seems the reason they hunt is not to feed, but to kill anything that makes sound, turning our noisy environment into one that is more suitable for the creatures. After their initial arrival, it didn't take much time, with our story starting 89 days after the invasion, for them to decimate most of the world's entire population, leaving only a few bands of survivors behind. So the key to living any kind of normal existence in this environment is to make sure that you never make a sound. Father Lee spends much of his time learning the best ways to adapt to this concept and makes many preparations around their home's area to help, including laying down soft sand on pathways, marking the non-creaky boards in the floors, and the family communicating exclusively in sign language. There's another layer to this, as additionally their daughter Reagan is deaf, which is problematic for her in an environment where she can't hear anything around her. And indeed, this proves to have grave consequences when we first meet the family, scavenging an abandoned town for supplies. The youngest son, Bo, becomes attached to a spaceship toy he finds, but Lee tells him to leave it behind since it makes a bunch of dangerous sounds. But after their parents leave, Reagan gives him the toy anyway. Heading back to the farm, the family approach a bridge, and Bo decides to give his new toy a try, going off with bright lights and noises. But Reagan doesn't hear this, even though she is standing right in front of him. Lee, seeing the toy, rushes to save his son, but it is too late, Bo being snatched up by a monster that quickly emerges from the trees. This devastating event has a huge impact on the family, but especially affects the relationship between Lee and Reagan. Reagan can't help but feel responsible, and blames herself, first for giving her brother the toy that her father forbade, but also that she couldn't hear what was happening right behind her. All of this leads her to believe that her father also holds her responsible for Bo's death, and as a result, he doesn't love her anymore. But it's clear that he does care about her, even if losing his son is certainly a lot to handle emotionally. And that is another layer to the family literally not speaking to each other because of the environment, with it also representing how they are unable to communicate with each other as a family to deal with the emotional aftermath related to the tragedy of losing Bo. Though when we pick up approximately a year later, it appears that all hope might not be lost, as Evelyn is now pregnant. The idea of having a child is a hard one to consider, especially in this specific situation, because if there's one thing a baby is gonna do, it's gonna cry, which could prove fatal to all of them. But there's also the idea that it's important to do their best to create life in this scenario. And hey, they do have some plan in place for the impending birth, having made a soundproof box with tiny oxygen masks to stow away their child when danger is around, which is just really kind of weird. Gotta stick the baby in the box, it's the only way. As we spend more time with the Abbotts, one thing becomes clear, that Lee and Evelyn's greatest priority is protecting their children from harm. And the monsters in this case also act as a stand-in for something that any parents face, the dangers of the outside world, and the difficult position as a guardian to eventually let your child out on their own as an adult, which is especially important with the outside world here being filled with deadly monsters. And this is why Lee takes Marcus out of the farm frequently, to teach important survival skills to his son, knowing one day he will have to make it on his own without his father's protection, but leaves Regan behind on these excursions, which she strongly resents, because she wants to go and learn, while her brother is terrified and wants to stay home where it's safe. But Lee knows that her being unable to hear is a detriment to their survival, and this is why he picks his son instead of her. Though as I said, he truly does care about her, even if coming off as cold sometimes, as Lee also spends time in his basement attempting to create a hearing aid for Regan, going through several versions, however none of them ever work, which surprisingly in the end actually proves to be the most important part of finally exposing the monster's weakness. Despite their best efforts to protect them, there are of course going to be accidents. Like when playing Monopoly, Marcus knocks over a lantern, crashing loudly on the ground, but it's the louder sound of a raccoon that instead winds up being their victim. This is another concept that proves useful to survival. It's okay to make noise as long as there's something else nearby making a louder noise, as the monsters will be drawn to this. We see this when Lee takes Marcus to a waterfall and the two are able to shout, as their voices are covered by the roaring sound of the water right in front of them. Left at home when Lee and Marcus go out again, Regan is upset and still feeling guilty over her brother's death, returns to the bridge where he died, leaving Evelyn on her own at the house at the worst possible time, as her water breaks and she will soon be giving birth. And all it takes is an unfortunately placed nail sticking up on a stair, jamming into her foot, and the resulting scream to bring the monsters to her. She is able to alert Lee outside that something is wrong, switching their normally white lights to red. The lights also noticeably making a buzzing sound that might unintentionally lead the monsters to it. She manages to escape to the upstairs bathroom, hiding in the bathtub. Lee quickly sets a plan in motion, sending Marcus to create a distraction to lure the monsters away from Evelyn. And what better way than fireworks? Lee runs to the house, explosions of light in the sky behind him, and when he makes it to the bathroom, Evelyn is gone. Only a substantial amount of blood left behind. Luckily, she's okay, and managed to successfully deliver her own child. Wow, she is one tough cookie. However, even if she and the baby are safe momentarily, hidden in a room under the floor, Marcus and Regan are still outside on their own, waiting on top of a grain silo for their father to come help them, another of his many rules, which leads to both of them falling into the mountain of corn, having an encounter with the monster, but are able to hide from it and survive the situation on their own. Lee does find his kids, but the reunion is short-lived as a monster returns, gravely wounding Lee and intensely attacking the kids in the truck. Regan cranks her hearing aid to try and hear, inadvertently finding the monster's weakness, with the hearing aid producing loud feedback that momentarily stuns the monster, but the sound is too much for her to bear, removing the device from her ear before making the connection. Outside, Lee grabs an axe, but rather than attacking, he sacrifices himself as a final act of paternal protection, signing to Regan that he loves her and always has, making his emotions clear before he's gone. Dropping the axe loudly and the monster attacks him, and the kids put the truck in neutral, rolling all the way back to the house. Hiding in Lee's office where Regan was never allowed to enter, she sees for the first time the setup at her father's desk, with all the various research and hearing aids he had made for her, proving to her that he did love her no matter what happened with Bo. This display also clues her into the monster's weakness, remembering its reaction to the screeching noise the hearing aid produces. And when a monster makes its way to the basement, she amplifies the signal, putting the hearing aid up to a stereo, causing the monster to expose its fleshy, weak inside head flaps. Evelyn then fires on the spot, blowing its head off with a shotgun, and this does take out the creature for good. While its body is normally completely armored and unaffected by bullets, when it opens its head, which it does involuntarily when someone hearing the loud noises the hearing aid produces, it is easily taken out if this one spot is destroyed. Looking at the security monitors, they spot several more monsters heading their way, but this time they are ready for them. Evelyn cocking the shotgun looking to her kids, ending the story at this moment. I really like this outcome for a number of reasons that help the story really resonate. Their weakness is only discovered by Lee's hearing aids that don't work. He was earnestly trying really hard to make Reagan one that would work, but it was actually his broken one that saved the day. So his attempts weren't without merit after all. Additionally, it's only due to the perceived weakness of Reagan being deaf that guides them to this in the first place. If she wasn't deaf, there would have been no reason for the hearing aids, and thusly the key to taking out the monsters would have never been found. Pretty cool how those major elements of the story come together. And hopefully now that they know how to kill these things, they won't have to put the baby in that box anymore. Yeesh. And while the ending is abrupt and quite open-ended, it sounds like a sequel is already being considered after the movie's massive $50 million opening weekend. The screenwriters feel that there is still a lot of story to tell, and the potential sequel could pick up after the first film or feature new characters following another family entirely. And I think it would be interesting to see them doing a prequel that would show us what happened before day 89 and the first days of the invasion. And with that, we have come to the conclusion of this ending explained on A Quiet Place. I really enjoyed the movie. It's a very intense, solidly made film that deserves to be seen in the theaters. Normally in horror films, when the soundtrack goes silent, you know something bad is about to happen. But with A Quiet Place, as the entire movie is mostly silent, it makes for the quietest movie theater experience I've had in my life. I'm sitting there like, don't eat the popcorn, it's too quiet! What did you guys think of A Quiet Place and its ending? Where do you think the story goes next? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Thanks for watching FoundFlix. See you next time.